Hey guys, it's Allie with Chaos Monkey, and I just wanted to do a pretty quick video on how I learned to knit being a crocheter first. And it's just going to be like tips and tricks. It's not going to be teaching you how to knit or how to crochet. There are a lot of videos out there for that. So my first part of my video is I'm just going to show you the basics of knitting and crocheting so you can see the difference. And then I will go into how I learned. So we're going to start with Red Heart, Super Seaver, Ombre, and Spearmint. That's the yarn I'm going to be using just to show you the basics here. And we're going to start with crochet. I'm just using an H-hook buoy, and the only difference between different brands of hooks have different heads, different style of heads, and people have a preference for one or the other. With crochet, it's basically yarn and a hook. And I'm going to make a slip knot. How I make a slip knot is I just make a loop, put my fingers in the loop, twist the loop, pull the yarn through. Oops, if I do it correctly. What? Sorry guys, I am not pulling it's falling out of my hand. So let me show you that again. Loop, twist the loop, pull the yarn through, there. Since I can't even make a slip knot at the moment apparently. And then with crochet, all you do is you hook the yarn and pull it through. Okay? And it's just a matter of how many times you wrap the hook and where you put the hook back in that determines, you know, what you're making or how you're making it. And as you can see, there's a chain, and basically, I said basically, I'm trying not to say basically. What you do is you work back into the chain. So like if I was going to do a single crochet in US terms, keep in mind that English, UK terms, and US terms are different. So if you are a knitter learning to crochet, please keep that in mind when you're looking at patterns and when you're learning. But a single crochet in the US, I'm going to go into the second chain from the hook, pull the yarn through, and then I have 2 loops on the hook, and I'm just going to pull through both. And I'm going to work back across this chain so you can just get an idea. This is working crochet in the flat. You I'm saying basically again, you work to one end, flip it, and turn it just like you would knitting, and work the other side back across. And you can, of course, knit in the round and crochet just like knitting. Now the pros and cons of crochet. Pros: crochet is faster, much faster than knitting, at least it is for me, and I think for most people, because you just get more mileage when you're crocheting. You get more space between the stitches, you can really grow the stitches. Like if I turn this here, and you can see there's my single crochet into the chain. Well, I'm going to turn it now, so I'm going to chain 1 because you need a little height, and depending on which stitches you're using, you would get more height. If I was doing a double crochet, well here, let's do a double crochet. I'm going to do 2 chains up, turn it. And this scares a lot of knitters. It's like, where do I go from here? It's scary. Well, it just comes with practice, like anything does. So what I do when I'm making a square is go right back in under into this big one. So I'm going to do a double, which means you wrap the yarn, pull it through. You have 3 loops on the hook, pull through 2, pull through 2. Remember, that's US double, not a UK double. So there you go. And see how you can get more mileage really quickly? You can really get some distance made and finish your projects really quickly. And see there, I just made a triple, and you can see the height difference right there. And my camera's not focusing. So I'm going to rip that back and just show you a triple again. Keep in mind, you can do shaping this way too. But remember, this one was a double. We chained 2, did a double, and now we're going to wrap twice. Go into the next stitch. Now we have 4 loops on the hook. Pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, and that is a triple. So you can see, if you're not familiar with crochet as a knitter, how much you can get done and how quickly because of just the nature of the crochet stitch. Crochet cons is it does use more yarn. On average, crochet will use a third more yarn than knitting will use in an average project. So also keep that in mind, but most crochet patterns, I imagine, would let you know yardage and all of that. Crochet Pro is it is better for tougher yarns, more substantial yarns with less stretch. Because as you can see, I just have one loop on the hook at any time, and this is my only tension. So if I have I'll do another triple here. If I have if I have yarn that doesn't have a lot of stretch, then it's easier to crochet it because I have less going on with tension-wise. I just have what I'm currently working on and a loop on the hook. So it's easier for those yarns that may not have as much give or stretch. So personally, I like to do a lot of my crocheting in acrylics and a lot of my knitting in wool or wool blends, because knitting, you need more stretch or it's really tough on your hands. And they both have their purpose. There's no yarns that is specifically for crochet. There is no yarns that are specifically for knitting. I don't know where people get that from, but they do. I think it's because of old school. Like most people would knit or crochet doilies and Irish crochet and stuff, and they used a lot of cotton thread for that. So if they steer you in the direction of cotton, it's usually because most of the people they know or who they work with are doily crocheters. So they'll give you a really thin cotton. But again, that's old school thinking, because there's so many amazing things and so many designers for crochet nowadays that you can do anything with crochet, you can do anything with knitting, and it all looks fabulous in any yarn. There's no yarn just for knitting or just for crochet, but do keep in mind that if you want to do everything in hand-dyed, you're going to need more for crochet, and that's going to get really expensive. So needless to say, I knit mostly with any of my hand-dyed. So now I'm going to show you knitting real quick for those crocheters. And again, this is not a how-to video, this is just a show-you video. There are plenty of videos out there that will show you how to do a chain, how to crochet, all the stitches for crochet. There are a million videos out there to show you how to do long tail cast on for knitting. But that's what I'm going to do right now, is long tail cast on. Long tail, you need a long tail. And I'm going to do my same slip knot. I'm going to put these on some wooden straight needles. I usually don't use straight needles, but we're doing this for this little tiny demonstration. Usually use circulars. And we're just going to do a long tail, and I'm just going to show you. I'm not going to go too into depth, but I'm just showing you the mechanics. When you do learn from a crocheter to a knitter, I would learn long tail first, because long tail is good for 99.9% of all projects. It has enough stretch, it's versatile enough, and it looks good enough. There are a million different cast-ons and bind-offs in knitting, but for the beginning, do a long tail, and that's what I just demonstrated. And again, there's a million videos out there for that. And then as you knit, you need 2 needles, because you knit off of one onto the other. This is flat knitting, so I just turned my work, and then as you can see, I'm just going to show you the way I normally knit. I'll go into more detail about that later. Alright, so I'm just showing you knitting. Sorry, there might be a lot of breaks in this because my phone memory is being an issue. But I'm just showing you how knitting works real quick. Try not to have my needles rub against everything here. And as you can see, you knit from one end to the other. And then I'm on this needle, and then I would turn, and then knit off this needle onto this needle. Now as you can see, pros and cons. In knitting you have, pro you use a third less yarn than crochet, cons you have all these live stitches on the needles. And there's a lot more pros and cons for each. I won't go into all of that. I'm just trying to do a quickie how to get you started. You'll learn all of this stuff as you go. Now, knitting usually makes a thinner fabric than crochet on average, depending, of course, on yarn thickness and needle size. And this is what scares crocheters right here, is having these stitches, because they can fall off and they're all live. And as you can see, that can be pretty scary. So when you first learn, I would suggest from crocheting to knitting is to use a grippy yarn. So use like a nice yarn wool blend, because if you also try to learn to crochet off of a straight acrylic onto knitting needles, you're not going to enjoy yourself, because you do need some stretch. Now this is 100% acrylic on wooden needles, but I knit, and I've knit for a million years, so this will work for me. But when you are learning, you know how you have a death grip and you pull really tight on everything? You're not going to be able to move this yarn. You're going to be miserable, you're going to be digging in here, stuff's going to be dropping off. So use a wool blend, use large needles, use wood needles so they're grabby, but use a wool blend yarn. And there's plenty out there now, a lot more than there used to be. Use a wool acrylic blend even to get the stretch you need. Because if you start, I think a lot of crocheters do that, they're used to using acrylics. Okay guys, sorry about the break, but basically I was saying, I said basically again, what I mean is that when you're learning to knit, use a wool blend, use grippy needles, and you'll enjoy it a lot more. And that's just the knit stitch all the way across. That's basic knitting. For crochet, you can basically use any yarn you want. I said basically again, oh my gosh. Because it's not so dependent on, a tight, this creates a lot more tension, and it's a lot harder to get them off the needles with a yarn that is not flexible. That is not an issue with this. So I'm going to go ahead and do another triple. And so if you're learning to crochet, any yarn would probably do, but use a thicker yarn and a bigger hook, just so you can see your stitches better, because you're going to have to get, the biggest thing with crochet is learning where to put your hook. And especially on the ends, you want to be really careful on your ends, because that's where crocheters go wrong. They add stitches and go this way, decrease stitches go that way. It's the same for knitting. If you're going to knit a small swatch like this, make sure that you count your stitches every time, because you can accidentally do decreases or increases, or yarn overs as you're learning. Again, that's just the basics. There's a ton of videos out there that will show you how to do crocheting and how to do knitting. But what I want to teach you is, as a crocheter, how I learned to knit. So when I crochet, I hold the hook in my right hand, because I'm right-handed, and I hold the working yarn in my left hand. And that's how I tension. I don't even think about it, that's how I grab it every time. And when I was learning to knit, I learned from a book, because it's before the YouTubes and all that got real big. I think it was 2008, 2009, or maybe I just didn't watch any YouTubes. But I was trying to learn the English method of knitting. Oh, also for crochet, there's two ways to hold the hook. There's the knife hold, which I'm doing here. I should probably not go straight to a single crochet US terms from a triple, but you can see that this is a way of holding the hook. And then there's pencil, which you use this way. I learned pencil. I taught myself knife hold, because pencil was hurting my wrist, because there's a lot more motion with pencil. Here, I'll hold it down here. As you can see, pencil hold, a lot more wrist movement. Knife hold, see how the wrist is more stable. So if you have wrist issues and you want to learn to crochet but it hurts, try the knife hold. And then for knitting, there's different ways to do it as well, to hold everything. And I was trying to do, in the beginning, I was trying to do English method, which you basically, gosh, I hate that word. You wrap the yarn around the hook with your right hand, if you're right-handed, your dominant hand, and pull it through. Now remember, this is all opposite for lefties. like that. Well, that did not work for me. I could do it, but I was really frustrated because I'm so used to holding the yarn in my less dominant hand, in my case, my left hand. So as a crocheter to a knitter, I figured out that there was something called Continental. Continental knitting is not throwing. What am I doing? Oh my gosh, you guys, look, I'm so bad. I did my tail in here. Yeesh. Because I so enjoy throwing. Let me get that out of there. There we go. I totally grabbed my tail when I was trying to throw. So this is considered, hold on. No, I had it right the first time. Let me get the tail out of the way. This is considered throwing and English style. What I learned was Continental, where you can hold the yarn in the hand you're used to holding it in, your less dominant hand, and you pick, which means you get into the stitch and you pick it off like this. And you can see I'm holding the yarn with my middle finger, going in, picking it off, and then pushing the needle off with my index finger. And this was what worked for me. From crocheting to knitting. So if you're having trouble being a crocheter to a knitter, that might be why, because you need to switch to Continental. It's usually the easiest way for crocheters to learn to knit. Plus, Continental is just a good way to learn, period, because it's faster, it's more efficient, and I think it's easier on your hands. No offense to throwers, but throwing does take that extra movement, even if you're really fast. And two hands going, and you know, and there's a million different ways too. You'll see people knit all kinds of crazy ways, crochet all kinds of crazy ways, hold their yarn crazy ways. I'm showing you the most efficient way to learn to crochet to knit, and that is to hold your yarn like this so it feeds through. Don't do this stuff. Don't do that, because you're gonna knit and you're going to get to the end, it's going to change your tension, and you're going to have to drop, and you're going to have to re-wrap. Plus, I've seen people turn their fingers purple that way, so get into the habit right away of just tensioning this way, and you'll see I tension it here, and most of my tension is right here like crocheting, and that's first finger for me. And then right here is where that tension pays off. So I don't have any problems. So that's the way I would suggest it if you crochet traditionally, because some people crochet pretty crazy, but if you crochet with the yarn in your less dominant hand, the hook in your dominant hand, Continental knitting would be the best transition for you. So the only other issue we have with crocheting to knitting is there are two main stitches with knitting. There is knitting and purling. As you can see, I've just been knitting. I've been turning and knitting and turning and knitting and turning and knitting, which gives us this is called garter stitch. Okay, not stockinette. Stockinette is the flatter fabric you're probably more used to see in knitting. This is garter. Well, most people that crochet to knit are afraid because they're like, yeah, I get all that, but how do I purl? Because I'm going to have to know how to do both to make anything out of knitting, unless I want it all to look like this. If you want everything in garter, you're fine. I would definitely learn garter because you need your tension down, right? Just like if you were learning to crochet, I would just do a square in the same stitch. I would do single crochet and turn it and do single crochet and turn it and do single crochet and turn it until you get your tension down. It's like with anything you're learning, you got to get your tension first, and then you can throw in extra stitches. Same thing with the knitting. Do a lot of garter until you get your tension down and how you like to hold your yarn. So purling this is going to be a little tricky because I have very long fingers. Okay, everybody's hands are different. And I learned to purl this way, and I think it was off a YouTube video way back after I learned a Continental knit. I was looking for videos to figure out how to purl, and I think it was a yarn store owner way in the middle of, somewhere in the middle of the US, that they did a quick video on this. And keep in mind, this is before knitting vlogs or podcasts were popular. So I can't even give her credit because I can't remember the lady, but this is how she taught her crocheters to knit in her yarn shop and how to purl. When you knit, the yarn is held in back. When you purl, the yarn is held in front. It's basically, purling is basically reverse knit. Okay? And let's see, I'm knitting here, excuse the lighting, and the yarn is in back. To purl, I have long fingers, so all I do is pull the yarn forward. See how I'm already tensioned? Pull the yarn forward. So when I purl, I go into the front of the stitch, yarn in front, purl, just pull it down, purl, purl. So you can see how that's really, really efficient. Excuse my the end of my straight needles hitting my box I have my camera on. So once you get your knitting down and your garter down, you can see there's really fast ways to purl in Continental. That may not work for you depending on your hands, depending on your fingers, depending on, you know, any issues you might have with your fingers or hands. But I just wanted to show you stockinette real quick. And I'm going to knit on this side. So basically for a stockinette, I say basically too much. You knit on one side, purl on the other side. And I'm just going to show you the change in the fabric once you learn to purl. Again, purling is not priority when you first start. Knitting is, to get your tension down. Now keep in mind, I didn't do purling all the way across on the back. So I have some garter here, so ignore that. And then you can see how the fabric is changing here into stockinette. And I'll do one more purl round just so you guys can see it. And you can see that I can knit and purl really fast. Because another issue you will have is having a tension change from your knitting to your purling. So I suggest trying to learn something similar to this because it really decreases the tension change versus some people have to throw when they purl and knit Continental and do English when they're purling, and that causes a huge tension difference. And it can show. It's called rowing out on your knitting. So there you go. So that's knitting and purling in Continental for a crocheter to learn how to knit. And like I said, this is not to teach you all of that, it's just to show you this exists, and this is probably going to be the best method for you. There are a million videos out now that can teach you all of this stuff. I'm just showing you what works best and would probably be the easiest transition so you don't get discouraged, because I think everybody can knit and crochet. There's no reason why you can't if you really want to. Crochet fabric is great for certain things. I love to crochet blankets because it's fast and easy. Knitting a blanket is torture. I love knitting socks because I like the fabric it makes better. They each have their place, and they work well together. You can do both in one project, and it's fantastic. So yeah, I'm just I hope I covered everything. If I didn't, I'll probably add a small video. I'll put a timestamp in there to show when I actually showed the Continental part, if that's just what you want to get to really quickly. But just do your research and just don't give up. You know, if your hands are going to fight you in the beginning. If you've been knitting forever and you try crochet, you're going to do a little freak out, not knowing quite where to put the hook, and your hands are not going to cooperate the way you want. Same thing if you're going from crocheting to knitting new crochet. Your hands are going to have an adjustment period and a tension issue. But it's worth it. I really think it's worth it to learn both because you'll really be able to do anything. I can look at any pattern. My world is wide open. I can use any yarns. I can use any patterns. I use expensive yarns. I use acrylics because I think acrylics work really well in crochet. You know, I'm not... It's just, it opens more doors. So I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye and edit all this together and see if I need to add any more information I probably forgot. There's a lot of pros and cons for each. I just don't want to get too in-depth in this video. I just want to show you the basics so you can see it's not scary to do one to the other. It's really not. It's just different tools using yarn.